If you want to learn the basics of barbecue and turn out ribs that look as good as these, yet still know how to manage everything when it doesn't go according to plan, then this video is exactly what you're looking for. I'm David Gafford, and here at the Barbecue Lab, Melissa and I have a goal to help make sure that you have the right gear and the right techniques to be able to really excel when you cook in the backyard. This video is really designed for people who haven't cooked much in the rib department and want to. Maybe you're someone who has a gas grill and you've never ventured into the smoking side, but you really are interested in that. That's who this video is for. This video is designed to help answer all of the questions that you might have if you're newer to smoking ribs. So let's get started. On the screen, I'm going to put a list of all of the things you need to make this recipe. If you don't have some of them, I'll make sure I put links down below where you can find what I'm using today, or you can scan the QR code on the screen right here where you can find all of those links if you're watching on television. These are the things that we use in almost all of our barbecue recipes, so we're linking to our favorite gear, and you can find that in the code or in the description. In order to smoke ribs, the first thing you have to do is buy ribs. So let's go ahead and see what we're working with today. This is a rack of pork loin back ribs. Now, many of you are probably looking at this going, are they baby back ribs? Yes. Thanks to Chili's from many decades ago, these are called baby back ribs, but they're really loin back ribs. These are one type of ribs that you can get, but you can also get St. Louis cut ribs, which are a cut of spare ribs. You can also get whole spare ribs. You can get country ribs. There's all different types of ribs that you could use for a recipe like this, but when you change the types of rib, the timing and the recipe alters a little bit. So this recipe is really designed for loin back or baby back ribs. What do you look for when you're trying to buy a rack of ribs at the store? These are just from our local grocery store. Nothing super special about these. These are just commodity ribs. But if you look through the packaging, you can see a couple of things. First, you can see that there is some intramuscular fat running through this rack of ribs. That's totally fine. I actually like that. It's going to help keep them moist as you cook them. If you find a rack of ribs that is all just this color with no fat whatsoever, you're probably going to end up with a drier rack of ribs. So I look for a little bit of intermuscular fat. Now, this fat right here, is that too much? Maybe, but we'll trim that off as we go. This is a standard rack of loin back ribs, so don't stress too much about picking out the perfect rack at the store. You'll learn more about how to avoid like exposed bones, like shiners, or different things as you go. But here's one point I do want to make. When you're looking at a rack of ribs, check the thickness. You want ribs that are pretty thick. And so if you feel one side and it's super thick, and you feel the other side and it's really, really, really thin, you probably want to choose a different rack. This one is a little bit thicker on this side than it is on this side. That's all baby back ribs. But in this case, this is relatively even, so I'm pretty happy with it. So this is going to be a good one to show, since it's what most of us are going to get at the supermarket. To get started with these ribs, we first have to get them out of the package, and it's pretty simple. One of the things I'll say is to keep it from getting all of the juice from inside the package all over the place, I like to just go ahead and cut open the ribs towards the top. And then I'll go ahead and take it and cut a little bit of the package open like this. Then I can just slide the ribs out, and all of the juice stays down in the package itself, and I don't have to really worry about a bunch of extra juice floating around on the cutting board. What I like to do as soon as the ribs come out of the package is grab a few paper towels, and we're just gonna dab off that extra moisture that's on the top. We don't really need that, so we're gonna go ahead and get that out of the way. A question we get a lot is how to trim a rack of ribs, and there's not a whole lot to it, especially if you're buying pork loin back ribs. These have already been cut into the shape we're going to cook them in, but one of the things you have to watch is these ribs were cut at a factory, and depending on how they were cut, you might have bone fragments on the outside of each bone where the saw came through to cut these ribs. So you need to go ahead and inspect the side of the ribs where the bones come in, make sure that you don't have fragments, or else those are going to be things that you serve to your guests or your family, and that's no bueno. So all I do is I come through here, I have my knife, and I'm going to look at each of the bones, and I'm going to say, is there any fragments on here? And this right here is a bone fragment that I'm going to take off. So see this little piece of bone that's detached from the rest of the bone? We need to go ahead and cut this off because no one wants to eat that when they're eating ribs later. I'm just going to go ahead and take it off. And that way, no one is going to be eating that little piece of bone. So that's something that's pretty common to find on loin back ribs. And for example, here's another piece. Just feeling around here in the bottom. There's another little piece of bone. We don't want that. Let's get rid of that. And you just do that on both sides. As I'm going through and looking at these bones, one of the things you're going to find on racks of ribs every now and then is you're going to find that some of these were trimmed with a secondary set of bones still on your ribs. For example, I can see that this bone here runs all the way through, but there's a secondary bone still up here that's hanging onto this rib. There is the regular rib bone here, and then you can see another rib bone that's all the way over here. So if I was going to trim this, I would come all the way through here and trim all along here to give myself a very clean rack of ribs. One of the last things I look at doing when it comes to trimming is I will check for like hanging bits off of the rib. I know that this is never going to actually survive a 6-hour rib cook, so that's something that I'll generally take off. But one of the things that I'll do first is I'll take care of this membrane. Now, there are barbecue restaurants across the entire United States and many other countries who will leave this membrane on and not do anything to it before they cook it. There are also barbecue restaurants that will take their knife and they will score it with a little checker pattern, and hopefully it will burn up during the cook. The thing that I find is that those barbecue restaurants that leave it on, they're not leaving it on because it tastes better. They're leaving it on for speed and efficiency. And for us here in the backyard, we're not looking for speed and efficiency because we're not making 70 racks of ribs at a time. We're making 1, 2, or 3 racks usually, and that's it. So we can take the time and take this membrane off. It's not really that complicated. I don't use this knife, which is my trimming knife though. I like to use a simple butter knife. And this butter knife is even plastic and disposable. All you have to do is come here and get in between the bones. And when you get in between the bones with your knife, you can get underneath that membrane, pull it up with your knife, and all you need is a little start like that. That's really all you need. Then you can take your finger and start going underneath this membrane, pulling it up from the middle. Once you have your finger slid all the way underneath this membrane, all you have to do is hold the ribs down and pull up, and that membrane will come off. And it goes a little something like this. There's the entire membrane off of a rack of ribs in one easy pull. Now that the membrane is off, I want to go ahead and trim anything that's not going to survive this cook. And this piece is hanging off. I'm going to go ahead and take that off. A little extra bit of fat right there. On this presentation side, not a whole lot going on, but there's nothing that I look at and say, okay, I definitely have to trim that off. Now, if competition was your goal, this is not what this video is really about. This is for people in the backyard who want to kind of flirt with a competition rib, but not go all the way competition. If you wanted to do that, you would go ahead and trim off the couple of end bones here. You'd make sure that the bones are straight. There's all different kinds of things you would do to make sure that you're turning in a rib that is the one bite perfection that judges are looking for. That's not what we're doing today. So we're cooking a whole eating rack of ribs. It's time to season the ribs, and when we think about seasoning, I want you to think about 2 different components. The first is salt. The second is flavor. Flavor can be sugar, spices, all different types of peppers, but I want to think about those 2 things separately because we've got to get the salt right and we have to get the flavoring right. I'm going to use the nitrile glove on my left hand, which is going to allow me to maneuver the ribs, pick them up, do all the things I need to, and get this one completely gooey and messy. And this is going to be my rub shaker hand. The 2 rubs I'm going to use today are ones that we've developed here at the lab, and the first is called our Essential Equation. Essential Equation is a salt, pepper, and garlic rub. This is what I use as a salt base on many recipes, and we're going to do it on this one as well. First, let's talk about the question that everybody has. Should I use a binder before I apply my seasonings to a rib? There are a lot of people who will use mustard, hot sauce, mayonnaise, olive oil, just water, all different types of things to bind their spices to the rib, and I find it's just not necessary. I think a lot of those options can put a barrier between the meat and the seasoning, and I don't want that. What you're gonna find is that if you put seasonings directly on this rib and let it sit for about 15 minutes, that is going to pull moisture out of that rib and give you the tackiness that you want where that seasoning is not going to fall off. So the secret to that is using your salt rub to be able to almost cure that piece of meat. But when you're only going for 15 minutes, it's not going to ever get to the cure or ham-like consistency. We're just going to put this salt on for 15 minutes, let it stick, become tacky, and do the same thing on the other side. So let's get started. You can find this essential equation down in the description or in the QR code that we showed on the screen. We're starting here on the back. We're gonna go with a medium coat. And here is what I think a medium coat looks like. I would call that a medium coat of salt and pepper on this. So that is going to be our first coat that goes down. Next, we're gonna put down our pork protocol, which is a seasoning that we designed to go with pork butts, ribs, and all things pork. This is a sweet rub, and so we're gonna go ahead and put a heavy coating of this on top of the essential equation. A heavy coating is going to be, you really can't see the essential equation anymore. It is hiding down below this rub, and we're gonna put it on there pretty liberally because this is going to give us our color. So color's coming from this rub, the salt's coming from the last rub, and I want to go ahead and make sure I get the sides. I want to get everything that is facing this direction right now. And then I'm going to let this sit and tack up. Another question people ask, should I press in my spices or not? I like pressing in the spices, but I'm just going to use this hand. I'm just going to press everything in that I just put onto this rib. And we're just going to do this side for now. So what I want you to do is take your phone or whatever you have for a timer, set a timer for 15 minutes, and we'll come back and do the other side. It's been 15 minutes. We can see that this rub has started to tack up on the surface. All we've got to do now is do side number 2. So we just flip this over, and if you notice, hardly anything came off of that, which is great. All we need to do is apply our essential equation. Remember, this is a medium coat, so something like that. And then a heavy coat of the pork protocol. Now, I like to season a little higher so you don't get the rub clumping on the ribs, but that's why I will hold it about a foot or so above and make sure that my rub is going to look nice and even on top. Of course, there's quite the slope here. Just put your hand underneath and you can make sure that you get even coverage, even to the sloped bits of these ribs. All that's left now is to press it in. So now it's time to start the grill. Let's see what we're cooking on today. One of the things that's awesome about shooting in a barn like this is that we can change out the grill that we cook on all the time. Today we're cooking on the Grilla Chimp, which is a portable pellet grill. And this grill is going to cook these ribs in such an easy fashion. I love pellet grills. Let's take a look at how we're going to do this. Make sure you've set a 30-minute timer on your ribs for those to really start soaking in that rub. 30 minutes, and that's all the time we'll need to get the grill up to temp. So we're using a pellet grill, but what other types of grills could you use? You could easily use a kettle or a Kamado, an offset smoker, even a gas grill. There's a whole bunch of different options. The question is, would changing grill types change the recipe? And the answer is probably. It depends on how that grill cooks. Is it an indirect cooker where you have your food on one side and the heat on another? That's what pellet grills are. You have a deflector plate that's between the food and the fire, so it's an indirect cook. If you're cooking on a kettle and you have coals right below the meat, that's a direct cook and a direct style that's going to change how you cook. So changing the grill might change the recipe a little bit, but that's a different video. Today we're going to focus on a pellet grill, which is really easy to control because the temperature is digital. We're aiming for 225 degrees today, so let's get some pellets in this grill and get it fired up. Now, I know you're asking the question, what types of pellets should I use? Well, today we're going to use smoke and pecan pellets, and these are ones that we're testing. I suggest that you use the pellets that you like. What type should you use? I'd say use an apple or a cherry. Fruit woods are great with pork. Another type is competition blends. It's a little bit of all different types of wood. There's maple, cherry, a little bit of oak. Those competition blends are great as well. But today we're using smoking pecan, and let's get those in the hopper and get this thing fired up. Smoking pecan pellets come in a box. All you have to do is open up the flap, and then you can open up the hopper and then pour directly in like so. If you've used a lot of pellets before, you're going to say, those look different than the pellets that I've used. Well, that's because these are pecan shell pellets. If you've seen pecan shells, that's the color that they are. And so that's what these are. So we're going to use these today, and you'll be able to see what they look like on this pork. Should you use a water pan in your grill? There's a lot of different grills that would benefit from a water pan. I don't think pellet grills usually benefit that much, but you could. We're not going to worry about it this time. That's another video for another time. We're going to Spritz instead. I'll tell you more about that as we get closer. But first, we've got to get this grill fired up. So we're going to set it to 225 degrees. And here's what that looks like on the Chimp. You can see we're set to 225 degrees. It's currently 85 degrees outside. We're going to let this come up to temperature while our ribs are still setting in that rub. One other question people are going to ask is, how would I increase smoke flavor? One of the best ways to do it is to use a pellet tube, and that's just taking a tube that's metal, that's serrated all the way through, lighting it full of a bunch of pellets and letting that smoke in addition to the grill smoking. You could also get a smoker box, which is a metal box. You put wood chips in, you light that up, blow it out, let that smoke the entire cook. You can use those to get a heavier smoke flavor, but I think that most of you, especially if you're getting started smoking, you're going to want a light touch of smoke, which is exactly what a pellet grill is going to give you. It's been 30 minutes. It's time to get the ribs on the grill. But look at this. Hashtag no binder, right? This is glistening barbecue rub on top of these ribs, and there was no binder at all used. You can see that the liquid has pulled out of that rib, and it is fused with that barbecue rub, and we have a lovely, lovely texture that we are getting ready to put on this grill. So this is ready to go. All we have to do is get this on the pit. And there's one thing you need to think about when you put it on the pit. We're gonna go ahead and lay it on here. And when it's on there, these have a tendency to want to spread out on you. So you're gonna wanna bunch these up a little bit because you want as much meat between the bones as you can. And so I bunch it up, just something like that. And then we are gonna close the lid and not touch this for 90 minutes. Now is the time to set a timer. Use something like the ThermoWorks time stack or a timer on your phone, but 90 minutes is the goal, and we're not gonna open that lid. Just let it run 225 degrees for 90 minutes, and we'll come back and show you what's next. There's about 2 minutes left before our 90-minute timer goes up, and we're gonna go out and we're gonna baste these ribs with butter. All I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn on our burner here. This is the Breville Control Freak induction burner, but I'm gonna go ahead and set this just to melt a little bit of butter. And there's nothing crazy about this other than we're gonna take half a stick of butter, throw it in our pan, get it melted, then we're just gonna drizzle it on the top of our ribs. This should be melted in just a second, and I'll meet you outside. Our 90-minute timer has gone off. Let's take a look and see what our ribs are looking like. If you look at those and say, man, they sure could use a spritz or some liquid, that's what our butter's for. So our rub has dried onto the outside. All we're gonna do is take one of these silicone basting brushes, which I'll link to down below, and we're just gonna baste our butter on top. This is just half a stick, and we'll use most of it on this, but our goal is to get some liquid on top of here and make sure that this is not going to dry out on us, but we're adding a little fat as well, which is never a bad thing when it comes to these ribs. These are going to be super delicious. So super simple. Just going to drizzle our butter on here. We have our lid closed up. We are going to set a timer for 60 minutes, and we're not going to open this again until that timer goes off. Our timer's gone off. It's time to spritz these ribs. Now, people ask all the time, what should I spritz with? There's a myriad of options. You could use apple juice, apple cider vinegar. You could just use water. You could use beer, grape juice, like white grape juice. There's mixed juices, all kinds of things you can put on these ribs. But today we're going to use apple cider vinegar. I like that it gives it just a little bit of a tang. I know that's what Melissa likes as well. So we're going to use apple cider vinegar. And all we want to do is make the outside of these ribs moist with this. So we're going for a fine spray, not a direct stream. Here's what that looks like. You can see that the ribs still have a little bit of moisture on the outside from that butter bath that we did just a little bit earlier, but we're gonna go ahead and do a little bit of cider vinegar. Here we go. Now we're gonna leave that for another 30 minutes before we get ready to go into our wrap. So no touching, no looking, 30 minutes. See you in a second. Our timer just went off. It's time to go ahead and take these ribs inside and we're going to wrap them. One of the first things, if you've never seen this before, if you've never done it before, you want to grab some of these cotton glove liners. I'm going to put these on my hands first because this will protect us from the heat. Then on the outside of these cotton glove liners, I'm going to put some nitrile gloves. And I'll link my favorites down below in the description. These are what's going to help me get messy without having to really clean up a giant mess. I just have to take these gloves off. But I'm protected from the heat, which means I'm not using tongs or spatulas or any of those kind of things. This is kind of a staple for barbecue for me. So if you haven't gotten these yet, I highly suggest them. Now for the reveal, here is what we are working with. I'm really happy with the color on these. This is gorgeous, quite happy. You can see the smoke still coming out of this grill. Those smoking pecan pellets are making a difference. But let's take these, get them inside, and wrap them up. Really happy with how these ribs look right now. You could go darker with these, leave them on longer before you wrap them, but this color works for me. Now what we're going to do is we're going to wrap these in aluminum foil. So the classic question, what should you wrap with? You can wrap with aluminum foil, butcher paper, otherwise known as peach paper, or you could leave them completely unwrapped. My preference, especially for those who are getting started, is using aluminum foil. And the number one reason is because we're going to use the Texas Crutch. This is a method that allows you to be able to take those ribs, allow them to steam a little bit in the foil, take on a few other flavors, and then get a really tender rib. If we continue to cook this on the smoker with no wrap or anything, it would be a good rib, but it wouldn't be super tender. This process is really designed to help us get the tenderness that we're looking for. So the Texas Crutch goes like this. We'll take our ribs and set them aside. I'm going to grab 2 sheets of aluminum foil. What I'm looking for is I want aluminum foil that is about 3 or 4 inches longer than the ribs that I'm wrapping on each end. So how do you know? Let's grab the ribs and find out. I've got a good 3 or 4 plus inches on each side of my rib, so this is a perfect size for this. Now, I'm not going to use just 1 sheet of foil. I'm going to use 2 because it's incredibly easy on a grill to rip through 1 layer of foil. Something could get stuck on a grate, you could move it weird, that foil could tear, and then everything we're going to put in this wrap will drain out. So 2 sheets of foil is my method that I just tell everybody about. So we're going to go ahead and add 1 more. To build this Texas Crutch, I went ahead and set the ribs on the top 2/3 of the foil. This way I can see a visual reference of how much I need to put down here when it comes to the butter and brown sugar and things that we're going to use. So I can see my ribs right here. And the first thing I'm going to add to this wrap is some butter. This is just unsalted butter, and all I'm going to do is just add it all the way across. I'm just going to space it out so that all of this rib is sitting in butter once it melts. So the butter's down. Second thing is I'm going to go ahead and use some brown sugar. You could use standard light brown sugar that everybody has in their houses. That's something you could use. I like to use dark brown sugar, but for those of you who are sticklers to the recipe, you are totally allowed 100% to use light brown sugar and not dark brown sugar. But this is my preference, so that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to take right around, let's say 1/3 cup or so, and just sprinkle this down below. That's it. I have butter, dark brown sugar. Now I'm going to take honey. So this honey is not going to be scientific. I'm going to guesstimate it's anywhere between an eighth and a quarter cup. I'm just going to go back and forth, and I'm applying this right to the foil, not to the ribs, and that's it. So if you want to measure that, you can. I would say an eighth of a cup would probably be adequate. If you look down here, you're going to see butter, brown sugar, honey. It's all ready to go, but our ribs are not on that. I could take the ribs and place them down like this. The problem is the bones are concave, and I'm not going to get any of that flavor into this meat. What I want to do is I want to take these ribs, flip them over so the meat side is facing down into all of this goodness. It's going to look just like this. Once my meat is submerged in the butter, brown sugar, and honey, now all we have to do is wrap up our ribs. The question is there anything on here that I see that I don't want to be in my final presentation? Now's the time to get that off. So if I look through here, there's a little bit of a piece of hanging stuff there. That doesn't look too great. These are just things that have come out during the cook that I'd rather not keep. So I have those off. Now it's time to wrap. All I do is I start by taking this back side, fold it over. I'll take the front side, fold it over again, then fold the sides over. And we have a nice tight package. Now recognize, I put these ribs meat side down, and they are still meat side down. All of the openings to this package are on the top. This end is open, this end is open, but I have that closed and on the top. That means none of our butter, brown sugar, honey are gonna release or to leave this wrap. They're good to go. So all we have to do now is take this back out, put it on the smoker, and then we are gonna let it go for 45 minutes without touching anything. Now I know some of you are asking, what temperature are the ribs? It doesn't really matter because they're not done yet. We're gonna start doing the temperature at the 45-minute mark in the wrap, but we're still running 225 degrees. We'll temp it after 45 minutes. Our timer has gone off. It's time to check the ribs and see where our doneness is. We're gonna use a thermopin to be able to check that. If you don't have a thermometer, check this one out. I really like it. But let's go ahead and see how our ribs are doing. If we go ahead and probe between the bones here, we're going to see that we're not even remotely close. So we tempt the ribs, they're not even close to done. They're about 165 and we're shooting for 205. We need the steam to build up in that wrap. And so this really begs the question of what do you do if your ribs are running behind and you need to speed them up, or if they're running ahead and you need to slow them down? What I need to do is I need to get these ribs done so I can take them home and feed the family before I've got another meeting tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this grill up from 225 to 250 degrees. You have to be flexible in barbecue and you want to leave yourself some time. This is going to give me a little bit of extra time. So I'm going to kick it up to 250 and we're going to set a timer for about 25 minutes and come back out and check. Our timer has gone off and we're going to check to see how far along these ribs are. I want to go ahead and open just a little bit so I don't let all of the steam out. But let's see how far we're progressing. I'll let you peek in there a little bit. You can see there's really not any pullback on those bones, so I can tell you they're not done. We're about 194, 195 on this end. I'm sure if I poked the other end, it wouldn't quite be there. But I'm looking for something a little bit hotter than that. I'm looking for a 203, 204 range. So these need to go a little bit longer. Now, if you look at the sky behind me, you can probably tell it is getting ready to rain here in Indiana. That means I need to move this grill, and luckily, I'm not tethered to power because you can get as an option for this grill a battery pack that hooks right underneath the pellet hopper. That battery pack means I'm not tethered and I can take this thing wherever. So here is where we will finish this cook. I know the lighting is different, the audio is different. Welcome to cooking outside. So probably 10, 15 minutes, we'll come back, check it again. But for now, we're still rolling at 250 degrees. So as you can see outside, it is a nice little downpour here in Indiana. So we are loving this front covered porch. Now we have Uno with us today. You can see him right inside the door. who is suffering some anxiety with us being out here without him. So we're going to make this quick. Let's come around here and see how our ribs are doing. Let's open them up. Looking pretty good. That color looks great. Between the bones, we're right at 200. I can work with that. 198. Yeah, if it were me and I was, oh, there we go, 204. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and call that ready to go. And what I want to do is I want to take this off the pit. We're going to leave the pit going, and let's go inside where you can hear me talk, and we'll finish these off. Since it's pouring outside and we're trying to get this done and get home to the kids, I want to hurry, but I also want to make sure you get all of the information you need on how to make these ribs. This is a barbecue basics video. We're going to cover your options. So let's take these out of the wrap. This is what our ribs look like out of the wrap. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm happy with the color. I'm happy with the feel. Now, here's a doneness test. If you don't have an instant read thermometer and you want to know how done your ribs are, you can pick them up from the center, and if the ends touch the ground or touch this plate, that means they're done. These, not quite done yet, but they're almost starting to break in the middle, but not quite. This is one of those types of ribs that you can hold up and do this with. But this is a really, really good eating rib. But at this point in the cook, I want you to ask yourself a question. Do you want this to be a dry rub rib, or do you want this to be a barbecue sauced rib? At this point, you can still go either direction. What I'm gonna do first is put another coat of our pork protocol rub on top and give it a nice crunchy exterior. We're gonna put it back on the pit and let that set. Then we're gonna look at some sauce options, but let's get that done first. Okay, we have our pork protocol. I'm just gonna dust the top of this with a fresh layer of rub, and that's gonna give us a nice little crunchy exterior for those of you who like it nice and crunchy with that dry rub rib. Now, I'm gonna take this outside and we're gonna put it back on the smoker and give this about 10 or so minutes to let this kind of melt in a little bit and set. Then we'll talk about sauce. All right, let's check and see what our dry rub is looking like on our ribs. Yeah, we've got a nice little crunchy exterior that you're gonna get some bite to it if that's what you're going for, but I know a bunch of you guys aren't going for that, so I know that you want some sauce. This is our barbecue sauce that we make. Now, we don't bottle it, so I would suggest that you use your favorite barbecue sauce, but all we're gonna do is we're gonna drizzle this right on top, and we're gonna try to make it so that we don't get massive streaks all over this thing, because that is one of my calling cards. I get streaks on every rack of ribs that I do because the sauce is so thick. If you need to cut your thickness of your sauce, I would suggest just cutting it maybe with a little bit of apple juice. You could use a little bit of vinegar, a little bit of water. If you cut your sauce, though, it's not going to be as thick and you're not going to have brush marks all over. The idea with this sauce is it is going to look nice and covered evenly, which I personally like. And look, no brush marks. Doesn't that look infinitely better than it did? All we have to do now is let that set up just a smidge in the grill, and we're gonna give it probably 5 or 6 minutes. And that's gonna be just short of tacky, and it's gonna be glorious. So, come back in a second. It's time to see our ribs at the end of our cook, and look how great of a day it is for barbecue. Gorgeous weather. You just never know what you're gonna get here in the Midwest. Our sauce should be close to set, and here are our gorgeous looking ribs. I have to tell you, those are the type of ribs that we make all the time here at the Barbecue Lab, and I hope that you can use this video to make yours just like this. Now we're gonna take them inside, and I'm gonna show you what's next. The ribs are done. Now all that's left is to slice them and eat them. So here's a little trick that I've learned from some of my friends on YouTube. I like to take a little bit of my sauce and put it down here on the board. This is gonna make it so that you don't ruin that gorgeous exterior that you've made on those ribs. So we're just gonna put a little bit of sauce down, And notice how thin that sauce is. We've really thinned it out using some water or apple juice. We'll flip these ribs over, and then you can see on the back, you can see right where to cut between the bones. I'm gonna grab my slicer, and I can notice that there are 2 bones there. Put my knife right between, and we can go ahead and cut that through. Same thing over here. And there is our gorgeous rib. Now you can see there's a pink little smoke ring going around on this rib, and that's great, but it is not required for good barbecue. You can read in, there's so many different cookbooks if you read from great barbecue chefs, that if you actually have a smoke ring, it doesn't matter. It's all just a flex. But the idea is you want the smoke flavor to be there and you want the bite to be there. That's the most important part. So in this video, I hope that you've learned something that you can take away and you can make great ribs just like these. I know that these are going to be dinner, but you guys are going to kill me if I don't take one on camera. So here's my one on camera. So good. There's the bite through that everybody wants on your ribs. You can bite through it. It doesn't fall off the bone, but you got a clean bone. So great rib. And it wasn't that difficult. I should finish chewing this before I shoot the rest of this. Normally I'd cut the rest and serve them, but the kids are eating these for dinner. They've got to be taken home. So I'm going to put these in something to keep them warm, and we're going to serve the family for dinner. I hope this is helpful. I hope you really learned something. If you want to get any of the rubs that we used in this video, just check the QR code up here. Or if you want to download the recipe, it's available on our website over at thebarbecuelab.com. I'm David. Behind the camera and doing almost everything you don't see on camera is my lovely wife, Melissa. Thanks for joining us. This has been part of our Barbecue Basics series. We'll link the rest of them down in the description below. I hope you go out and cook something great for your family and friends. We'll see you in the next one.